you can rewatch them if you like. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to cover the planning your project. And actually also a lot of the bits also refer to the application form. Now, I'm not going to go over the rules of the program, but I'm more just focused on how groups can just plan their project. So before we jump into the project, I just want to quickly talk about your groups, more specifically the management and governance as it relates to the project. So first of all, if you're planning your project, just first of all, make sure your group are eligible and that you also have your documents ready because you're going to need them for your application. We're just going to attach them to it. Also, make sure you have a group bank account. Those who do secure funding, they will only be paid into the group's bank account. No personal bank accounts will be used. And also decide who's going to be doing what for the application stage, but also have a plan for if and when you get your funding. So for the application, who's getting the funds, who's completing the form, who's writing the answers, who will be the point of contact. And then during your project, who's going to manage it? It could be that you decide maybe you want to set up a project management subcommittee. So it could be people within your community and from your board who are going to look after everything. Now, this is optional, but it could be a good way to manage the project, especially for bigger projects or projects that have a lot of multiple components, because it could be you might be doing something on energy, something on biodiversity, and something on like recycling. And people could have different interests or ability to look after those. So kind of give that a little think. And also, see what's worked and not worked for your group before when you've been doing your projects and when you went for funding. And there is going to be an application in, there's a section in the application form where you can include this as well. And don't forget that there are marks for your management and governance when your project will be assessed. Now, I just want to cover the very fun topic of state aid for a minute, because it might impact how much money people apply for, or even if they actually want to continue through to application. So again, we talked about it last week, but I'm just kind of going to go over a few bits now. So the state aid rules are there basically to make sure that trade isn't affected at an EU common market level with public money. And I would say, again, that for 95% of groups who are applying for this program, this is going to be straightforward and irrelevant. So if groups are deemed as being in receipt of state aid, then they can't have received more than 200,000 in de minimis funding over the last 3 fiscal years. Now, if you are a group who's going to be classed as having received state aid and you've received more than 200,000, please get in touch. It doesn't rule you out, but there are just a few more things we have to consider. So again, most groups won't have an economic element affecting the EU market, so it'll be inconsequential, and the 200,000 cap won't be relevant. And I will want to talk with each individual group, but I'm just going to go through it now so that everyone's on the same page. So to tell if your class is state aid, you have to answer 3 questions, and these are going to be the exact same questions that you see on the application form. So if your group has no economic activity, then you are going to be no to all questions. You don't have to think about state aid, you don't have to think about de minimis, bar ticking no on section 3 of the application form. Now, I just want to say that economic activity is when any money is changing hands. Now, technically, if you sell a cup of tea, you have an economic element. Membership fees would also be something that is a class as an economic element. And I know we've got some sports clubs interested, so I just kind of want to mention that. But to be considered state aid, you have to answer yes to all 3 of the state aid questions. And a good few of you might tick yes to the first one, but you have to tick yes to all 3 for the state aid rules to start applying. So let's go through the questions because the language is a little technical. So question 1, sorry about that. Question 1, does the funding confer an advantage on one or more undertaking over others? So if you have any economic element, first of all, and you're given access to this funding, you are in theory getting an advantage over others because it's a limited resource and not everyone who applies is just going to get money from the Community Climate Action Programme. So if you have any economic activity then you tick yes. If you have no economic activity, then you tick no, and you're not considered state aid, and you don't have to think about it. So if you tick yes, go, then you have to consider question 2. So does this funding distort or have the potential to distort competition? So if your economic activity is very localized and you couldn't impact competition beyond your local area, then you select no. If you selected yes, and you think, God, we kind of do, you have to consider question 3 then. Does the awarding of this funding have the potential to affect trade between EU member states? So if the economic element that you're engaged in does not and could not be traded with another EU country, then you select no. Now, if the economic activity does or could be traded, then you have to select yes. And if you get, you answer 1, 2, 3 and you're yes, 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 then you have to consider what other funding you have received over the last 3 fiscal years. Now, if you've received public money, typically it's usually in the letter of offer. It'll say this is de minimis funding. But not all public funding is de minimis, so check. Things like LEADER can be, sometimes SEI grants can be, so check those. So I just want to give 2 examples, which I think is going to clarify everything. So say, for example, you're a local GA club and you're applying for this program. You have a membership fee, say. That is an economic element, but the activity is very localized. So your club might be utterly amazing to be part of, but you're not going to be maybe thinking like impacting someone in France deciding what club they're going to join. So you might be, you're yes to question 1, but you're no to question 2. And therefore your class is not being state aid because you have to be yes to all 3. But say if you are a group, and it could be because social enterprises are allowed to apply for this, say if you are selling something nationally and it can be sold to the EU market, then you would be yes to all questions and you have to consider the de minimis ceiling. Now, I'm not going to go over the next 3 slides. It's basically just an explanation for each of the 3 questions. We've just gone over it here. I'm just going to, it'll be in the slides so you can read it later. And please get in touch if you have any questions over where you're going to stand on the state aid. So on to your projects. So just let's cover some basics quickly. It has to be a direct climate action project. So it's either reducing emissions or it's combating the impact of climate change. So I just want to say things like indirect would be things like education and awareness. Again, they have an awful lot of merit. They are needed, but it's not the focus of this funding. 100% funding is available for capital costs. You can use other funding for other aspects, and perhaps that might be the indirect climate action bits you want to do, and you can also use match funding. You should address as many themes as possible, and you're more likely to be scored higher. Your projects must be completed within 18 months, and you must own or lease the building or land, and any capital works done should be available for the community for 5 years after the project ends. And also your locations, you could have multiple locations where you plan on doing something. So here are some of the project ideas we looked at last week under each of the themes. So it could be, you could be doing lighting upgrades. You could be putting in cycle parking. You could be doing a community fridge, mini forest, water, rain harvesting planters. Again, these are only examples and we're open to loads of ideas. So when you're designing your project, know the need your project is satisfying. So what part of your community's transition to being low carbon are you looking at? So for example, a group might need to address the single-use plastic in their area. So they're doing a project under theme 4, shopping recycling. And then when you kind of know about the need, you kind of have maybe a project idea in mind, look for other examples. It could be the case study document that is available on our website. It could be you just start checking on the internet, Googling words and things. Or you might know a community who've done something similar and you want to talk with them about what their project is. And I would also say, please get in touch with myself to discuss your project. A key part of my role is helping those who are funded, but also helping everyone apply. So know what you need as well to deliver your project. So have you designed out the project? Do you have the land titles or do you have a lease? Do you need planning? Do you need a license? Is your area in a protected area? Or is there any other kind of red tape element you need to have for this project to take place? And you will need that secured and stated that it's secured in your application. Also, I would say consider things like insurance as well. So will your project change your current policy? Will it add on much more? Can you tweak the project? So if the insurance is quite high, is there something you could change that can lower it if it has gone too high for your group? I would say things actually that say solar panels and EV charging installations, they can actually alter your insurance. So do check those things out. Also, just want to say that insurance isn't an eligible expense for this program. And then can you get your 3 quotes for your application? Can you check with the suppliers? Can you do your due diligence around that? And then obviously you need to secure the funding. So completing your application form and also determining what you'll need with the bridge financing. Now we'll talk about that more later, so I won't go into it in too much detail now. And so with those kind of few things in mind, I want to go through each theme and mention just a few things people should take into consideration. So theme 1, community and energy, this is all about energy. So it's your energy efficiency, it's your lighting, it's your retrofitting, it's your renewable energy projects. First off, if you have a building, please look at the fabric first. So that's your walls, your doors, your windows, and your roof. So a well-insulated building, you're going to have lower running costs. You're going to be more comfortable. You'll just have better energy efficiency. So basically, you want to reduce the amount of energy you need, first of all, by just cutting down on the amount of energy you're using. And many buildings lose an awful lot of energy through the fabric. Don't forget as well to consider your lighting. So lighting can be a big energy user for organizations. Say LEDs use 85% less electricity than usual bulbs. And also, if you're doing outside lighting, please consider light pollution. Often we overlight areas and we don't take account of wildlife. And light pollution is one of those types of pollutions that we can instantly get rid of by just turning off the lights or just lowering the lights. Energy audits. So this is kind of an interesting one. Now, you do not need to have completed an energy audit to apply for this program, but I would say that they're a great way to assess your current energy use. That's your fabric, your building fabric, your lighting, everything like that. And also it's going to suggest what low carbon renewable alternatives you can use. Now, they typically cost between 1,500 and 2,000. Now, if your group has an energy spend over €10,000 per year on all your energy, you'll probably qualify for SEI's energy audit voucher. And that voucher will cover most or all of the cost of your audit. And I'd advise all groups to apply today for that if they can. Now, if your spend is under 10,000 and you aren't sure what you need, or you don't have anyone in your community who's an expert in that area, who works in that area, please get in touch ASAP and we can have a little discussion about that and what other options there are for you. Now, a few things. Many groups I've met are interested in solar panels. A lot of people are, and they're a great clean energy option. Now, they are best for people who have a daytime energy demand. So when the sun is out, when it's shining, you use the energy when it's being made. Now, batteries are an option and they're a great option for some people, but just point out that they can be quite expensive. Heat pumps, they're a good way to heat your air and water. Now, they are best for airtight buildings. That's kind of the newer builds, or those who have upgraded the fabric of their building so that the energy efficiency, the insulation levels are quite good. And it is better for buildings that are frequently in use. It wouldn't be as good for a building that only needs to be heated a few days a week. And now the second theme, so this is all about reducing emissions from traveling. So this is the encouraging the walking, the cycling, the vehicle sharing, the taking public transport. So there are certain things you might love for your community, but they aren't in your power to do. So know who's responsible for what. So the local authorities, the Waterford City and County Council, in our case, is responsible for the roads, the footpaths, cycle lanes, active travel planning, and EV strategy. So if they consider that, then we've got the National Transport Authority, the NTA. They are responsible for the bus and the rail routes, including as well bus stops and things. And then Transport Infrastructure for Ireland, they're responsible for road and rail. Now it might be, it could be a good idea for your group to get a sense of what it's like for your community to travel around your area. And there are multiple travel audits available online that you can just do amongst yourselves. I would say there's two nice ones. There's one from the NTA and there's also one from the GAA Green Clubs. Now EV charging points, they can be great. There are communities rolling them out, but there's a good few bits to consider with them. So first of all, Waterford City and County Council is only developing its EV strategy now. Also, so that could change the landscape of where chargers are. Also the size that you're going to put in. Are you going to put in a slow charger or a fast charger? That's going to depend on your current electricity supply and also your budget. Do you have enough users if you put it in? Do you have a suitable location? Like, is there a parking spot that you can place that EV charger? And they also say that, like, plan for how it's going to stay functioning in years to come as changes come with EV chargers. Also, again, consider your insurance for this one. How are you going to manage billing? And have you organised a new connection with ESB? Because technically you will need a new connection if you are selling electricity. Now, so the third theme, food and waste. So composting and arbories, they typically don't require planning permission, because they're often seen as a resource within the community, because you're reusing your own waste rather than you are being waste processors. But if you start taking in outside waste or you start using kind of animal waste, you might need a license, you probably will. So check with council just to make sure that your composting and farmeries, where they stand on licensing. Now, allotments and garden and community gardens, they're slightly different concepts, but they have a lot of similarities. They can be on public or private land, but they often do require planning permission. So if you're planning on setting a new one up, or you might be a community centre with green space, please check in with the planning department of Waterford City County Council, because there's a good chance you will need planning permission. Now, community fridges. So I'd love to see a group do this in Waterford. I would say for these, you do need to follow food safety and hygiene rules. So groups might need to register as a food business and complete some very, very, very basic food safety training. I was chatting with the HSE environmental department about this, and what they basically said is depending on the scale of the work you're doing, so what kind of food you're providing, how much of it and things, you'll need to check with them for each individual project, because they can't say definitely what you need. So depending on the size, the requirements you might have to go through might be quite minimal, but it is something to consider. Now, shopping and recycling, fourth theme. So if a community group is planning on collecting waste as part of their circular economy project, they might need a waste collection permit, but it depends on what type your group is and also what waste you're collecting. So please check in with Waterford City County Council about this, or just email myself about any of these queries. And I just want to say there are loads of resources out there for free, from My Waste, from Voice of Ireland, and also on our own website that has resources available for this. Things about understanding people's mindset about waste, developing a waste master plan, and communication strategies. So you don't have to start from zero. Now, so the final theme, local climate and environmental action. So I would say we're going to see a lot of biodiversity projects, and which is absolutely great. And now some of them are they're really well-meaning, but sometimes a lot of these projects that we can see, they can be really ineffective, and sometimes they can cause a bit more damage. So please check out the All Ireland Pollinator website, and they have great resources available for communities, schools, businesses, sports clubs, where basically they have advice on how you can do pollinator projects. If you are doing a biodiversity project and you just want to check it seems okay, you can send the details into me and I can check with our team here in the council if they'd have a quick look over it. Now, water quality and conservation, it's a bit like energy. You need to know to get a bit of a baseline. And there are some great audits available online. And I would say there's a really lovely simple one available on the GAA Green Club's website, which I would recommend checking out if you kind of want to get a better sense of how your group are using water. A quick note on water management. We all saw the effects of Storm Babette and Storm Ciarán and Storm Debbie, not so much down here, but flooding is an issue, and it's a big impact we're going to see from climate change. So there are, and obviously it is something going to be affecting Waterford. So there are ways to reduce the risk of flooding or lessen the impact, and that's all about like climate resiliency. So I just want to say that there's on the Law Pro website, so the Local Authority Waters Programme website, they've got great examples, projects the community groups have done around this, and advice for groups who want to do water management projects. So I just want to point that out to you. So that's some of the practical project elements I just kind of want to flag with you. So when you when you're in the process of deciding what your project is going to be, remember to keep in mind the objective of this program is to shape and build low carbon sustainable communities. So I've met many groups so far who have wonderful project ideas in mind for their community, but they aren't quite the right fit for this program. So I would just say, please don't fall into the trap of having like a square peg project for this kind of round hole program. So always just kind of come back to that objective. Are you shaping and building a low carbon sustainable community? So it has to be really clear how you're tying in with the program. And on the application form, you've probably seen you are asked what your project is doing for climate change. So just always think, are my actions making my community less carbon intensive and more sustainable? So I would just say, know which themes you're hitting. Is it theme 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Which of those you're hitting? And also know what national climate action targets you're hitting. So Ireland and Waterford have specific climate and energy targets for 2030 and 2050. This is going to be looking at energy efficiency, renewable energies, reducing transport emissions, making an area more climate resilient, increasing biodiversity, creating carbon sinks, reducing waste. That's all circular economy, and also the just transition. So know where your project idea is going. And I just want to mention as well the UN SDGs. So many grant programs want participants to know how their projects align with the UN SDGs. So the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they're a blueprint, a kind of like a call to action for all countries, both developed and developing, to address global challenges. It's 17 goals under people, planet and profit. And applicants for this program are just asked to consider these. So there's a few small marks going for this. Just simply know which one your project is aligning with. Now you can go much deeper, and that's great. Goals can be a great way to look at projects. Now, so ideally, when you're planning your project, think, is it innovative? Can it be scaled up or replicated? Many projects I've seen so far, because I've met a good few groups, I can honestly say many of them could be replicated or scaled up. So this is a great thing to be able to say your project could do. So innovation, it can be, within this project, I could see why that could be a little tricky, but there are definite ways your project could be innovative. It could be clever ways that you're solving a problem in your area, or it could be ways that you're making your project especially effective for your location. Maybe you're taking something from an urban setting, putting it in a rural setting. Could be your type of organization. Maybe it's something that type of organization doesn't typically look into, or it could be just the type of project you're doing is innovative. And again, many communities can learn from each other, and projects carried out by one group could be scaled up or replicated in another community. So consider who you can learn from, and also who can learn from what you do. So at the end of the 18 months, maybe it'll be like a community in Offaly loved what a community in Waterford did, and they just replicated it in their area. Now, consider as well who will be impacted by your project. Is it just going to be members of your group? So some groups are quite insular and it'll be a small, tight-knit group. Or actually, is the project you're doing impacts the wider community beyond those who might be an obvious member of your group? And obviously, the wider the reach, the more impactful your project has the potential to be. And also, when you're planning your project, consider how are you going to engage your community? So will you need signage? Will you need posters? Are you going to hold events such as energy talks, waste workshops, cycling classes? And now I know many of those costs aren't eligible for funding through this program, but there are ways that Waterford Council might be able to help you with programs that were already running and available out there. And that brings us kind of on nicely to partnerships. And I just want to say a quick note on who you might work with on your project. So this is not compulsory. You do not have to have project partners, but there will be a small amount of marks going towards this. Now, I do want to say people applying under Strand 1A, the Northern Irish project, they do need partners. They need a partner for the North. So for Strand 1, you could form a partnership with another group like a sports club, a tidy towns, a men's shed in your area. Or perhaps you want to seek advice on a particular topic from a bigger, perhaps national organisation. Now, there are a few reasons you might want to consider partnerships. So you might just need it just to get some expert knowledge. It could increase the impact of your project, the size, the scope, just the sheer amount of people who are going to get involved and be impacted. Also, I would say this will be a competitive program with limited funding, and we would like a nice geographical spread. So groups in one location could choose to pool their projects together and apply as one if they wanted. You do not have to do that. It's just an option. And also, please don't forget that Waterford Council can provide supports. Myself, as the Community Climate Action Officer, I'm here to help you during your application, but I'm also here to help those who are carrying out the project. I would say that there are resources available from the Waterford Sports Partnership. They often run cycling classes for adults. It could be maybe you're in a slightly more rural spot. You're putting in cycling parking to encourage that in your community, but you think some people might need just a few classes on how you cycle on roads, getting around and stuff. And that could be something maybe they could assist with. The Environmental Awareness Officer, I'm sure many of you know Ella Ryan already. So she also runs workshops and things. So maybe there's things we could tie in. There's also kind of other programs run like Healthy Waterford. And they fund a variety of different things, but like they're also responsible for the Playful Streets program. So there's different ways that we can maybe tie in with different programs being available. And partnerships, you might want to do this in a formal or an informal way. Partnerships don't necessarily have to be about just the number of different groups. It's not that, but it's more just the kind of meaningful connection in your area, or maybe increasing the impact of your project or getting expert knowledge. And on your application form, just always making it clear who's doing what and why you're involving people. Now, obviously, a big part of a project is the budget and the value for money. So groups need to self-certify that they need their need for this grant, and it should be made clear in your application. For your application, you're going to need 3 quotes for each item. Now, if you can't get them, sometimes it might not be possible. It could just be that there's just really only one supplier in the market providing what your community wants to put in. So if it's the case you can't get your 3 quotes, just touch base with myself before the deadline, just so we can go over that. You don't necessarily have to pick the lowest cost, but you must have a rationale for why you pick maybe the supplier you're going with. And it must be a balance between costs and results achieved. A lot of around your costing is just doing due diligence to make sure that like your project is going to be good value for money, good value for public money or taxpayer money, our money. And also consider the investment versus impact. So how much is your project costing versus the climate impact? Just say there can be sometimes energy projects or maybe travel projects can cost an awful lot of money, but you might not know what tangible result you'll get at the end. So it's that kind of balancing that up to make sure that, again, we go back to this good value for money and will have impactful climate action projects. I would say include a contingency in your budget, especially for the bigger projects. And when getting your quotes, this might be a little difficult, I understand, but maybe have a discussion with the suppliers to see if the quote will still be valid for when you start carrying out the works. Anyone who does receive the funding, so who successful will have to follow public procurement guidelines. They might have to redo their costings and their tendering, but that's a kind of a later issue. You can include VAT in your project cost if your group cannot reclaim VAT. If you can reclaim VAT, your cost should be exclusive of VAT. And I just want to point out one thing for the Strand 1A projects, all your quotes must be provided in euros. And if there's any sterling conversion rate differences when you're actually carrying out the works, the group is going to have to take on those differences. Now, also, when you're planning your project, have a rough plan on how you'll do the project if you actually get funding. So be able to summarize your work plan into the major milestones of the project. So we expect to do this month to get our 5 project pieces over the line. And describe the information you're going to be collecting regularly to know whether your project is on track and is delivering the results. Also, have a little think about how are you going to monitor if your project is a success. So will it be the CO2 saved? So that would be very easy on things like people who are doing energy projects. So if you're retrofitting your building and putting on solar panels, you'll be able to have, say, a good idea from the reports of how much CO2 is being saved. For others, could it be the number of people who are now cycling in your community? Will it be your reduction in waste? So the monitoring of success will totally depend on what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily have to be very complicated or very scientific. It's just a way so that you can track if the project is a success and making your community less carbon intensive. Now, so reimbursement. So this is kind of tied in with the bridge financing and the pre-funding. So this is a reimbursement grant technically. So that means you spend the money, you will get it back once you put in your receipts and everything. And this will be on a quarterly basis. Now, some groups are not in the financial position that they can, that they have the money available to do that, or they have the ability to go and potentially get a loan to do that. Now, some do have that ability, and I would say that those who have should do it that way. But those who cannot, Waterford Council can provide the pre-funding. Now, for those who are going down the pre-funding route, or even if you're using your own kind of funds, pre-funding will only be given out in agreed amounts. So that's no one is going to get 100% of the project cost at the beginning of the 18 months. That's not going to happen. It'll probably be given out in 25% tranches. Now, I just want to say that when you're considering the reimbursement and the pre-funding element, just make sure that you tie that back into the milestones. Because when you submit your receipt, we have to check it, and then we have to submit it to the Department of Environment. So that could take about a month and a half to get all that done. So if you're waiting to get your money back to start your next bit, just kind of have that kind of considered roughly in the timeline. For anyone who is successful in receiving the funding, I'm going to be sitting down with them. We're going to go through the milestones together. We're going to go through the pre-funding if they're going to be there, or when you're going to get your reimbursement. Now, so if you are interested in applying, please, the first step is contacting myself. We'll discuss your project. Then you're going to design the finer details of your project. You're going to cost your project, get your 3 quotes, and then you're going to complete and submit your application form. I would say before you complete your application form, just make sure you always come back to the objective of the programme: to shape and build low carbon sustainable communities. Make sure you read the guideline documents online, be familiar with the evaluation criteria. I would say that there are specific questions that do relate to the evaluation criteria, but if you mention it somewhere else, say if you address your governance and your management somewhere else and you don't really necessarily do it clearly in that section, we're going to mark you for the whole application, not just the individual questions. Be able to summarize your project in a few sentences. This is really key. For groups who can't do this, it could just make it clear in your mind. Be able to just really quickly say who you are, what you are, what's the project, where are you going to do it. If you can't do that, it makes everything clear in your mind. And please remember, you are explaining the project to someone who might know nothing about your group or your project. Be clear, use plain English. The word count is only a guide. How much information and detail include is just for you to make sure it's clearly explained. You're not required to reach the word count, and ideally, if you can get your point across in fewer words, then please use fewer words. Being concise is always better than including irrelevant information that makes people kind of get confused about your project. And again, if you have any questions, please get in touch. Now, I'm not going to go into this again, but you can apply either online or you can download the Word version, which you email in or post. All of those are available now. You still have the same deadline regardless. It is the 19th of January at 3:30 p.m. If you do post in your application form, your supporting documents, it has to be stamped on that date. Again, there are loads of resources available on our website. The briefing note and guidelines that contains all the details about the programme, the examples of community climate action projects, a planning document, how to plan your projects. It's been written not specifically for this one, but like generally how you could apply for funding, and also just kind of a little more detail about the UN SDGs. Now, please do not, I feel I've thrown a lot at you, do not be put off by the technicalities and the rules and maybe certain things about the planning and the licensing. All that can be overcome. Remember, many of you have done projects for years, you have the experience. Climate action is a win-win for everyone in your community. And although medium and large projects are prioritised and the majority of our funding will be going towards them, we want to see small projects too. We want to see them all, small, the medium and the large. Now, I am going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop recording, and I am